pulling.
All right, so you're hosting too?
That's what I'm here for. I thought I was doing the whole thing. I thought I was going to be back there with you, like orchestrating.
On this episode of the podcast, Chandler Smith asked Adam and Max some coaching and programming questions, including how they've evolved their programming over the different eras of CrossFit, what are some things they've tried in coaching that didn't work with their athletes, what in CrossFit is overtested and what's undertested, if they had to get a 15-year-old to the games in 10 years, how would they set them up for success, and if you could only give an athlete one monostructural movement, one weightlifting movement, and one gymnastic movement, what are they?
You guys have both been doing this for how many years overall?
I've been coaching since 2010, 2011. Right around then was when I started writing programming for people.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started in 2000. It was either late 2009 or early 2010. I started like a weightlifting club in the CrossFit Delray Beach that I was there, and started like one-on-one coaching people, and then went to OPT, and the rest is history.
Yes, now we're here. So over like 15 years, I think there's probably been a lot of changes within how you guys specifically program and within how things are tested. You know, in the past, maybe the open was more important. There's been times and periods where the competitions outside of the CrossFit schedule have been more important. Like, how would you categorize the changing ways that you've evolved your programming, and like, can you define that in like different eras? Like, did you spend 5 years doing something a certain way and then 5 a different way? Or like, how would you separate your time in the space as a coach?
Are you going to explain what after all that? Chandler's original question proposed that there was 4 eras in CrossFit, basically, in competitive cross. Am I going to do disservice to trying to?
No, you won't do disservice. I was supposed to be back there. This isn't about me.
Yeah, well, I thought it was a good baseline.
It is a good baseline.
Yeah,
because then I think we could use those eras to kind of jump off about like where we started using certain interventions or certain progressions.
Yeah, I mean, I could jump in and then you can come back to yours if
I'll
it
let
would
you
make you
start.
help.
I want this to be
So mine was more from a coaching lens, I think, than like the lens that you looked at the eras was through the professional dynamics.
Hold on, are you going to describe these things?
Oh, I was going to let him do it later.
I think you should start with it, right, Adam?
All right, Chandler.
I agree.
Back at you.
Well, it's the question that I had too, because initially you would send us over like, what do you guys think about the four-stage model?
Do you want me to just read your text message?
That's so many words.
Chandler, just describe it.
All right, so there's something I remember reading a long time ago about how you can define most sports into 3 eras, and they use the NBA as an example of like, you have early adapters, and basically at the beginning of a sport, the people who know about the sport and are kind of decent athletes are going to be good at it. And then in the middle stage, it starts to professionalize a little bit. Some elements of it end up looking familiar to what you see in the late stage. And then late stage, you have like worldwide availability, and the population group that's capable of doing the sport is maximized. So people need to meet certain genetic parameters to be successful at the sport. You can't just like decide that you're going to go and be awesome at it. And from a CrossFit and functional fitness standpoint, at least like in regards to how we do it, and the 4 stages that I had were, the initial stage is pretty similar to the early adopter stage for other sports, in which basically if you knew about CrossFit, you could sign up and go to the games 2007, 2008, or if you wanted to make it to regionals because there was 60 spots, and you know, if you lived in California, there was 2 regionals, like pretty much anybody could do it as long as you were an okay athlete and had the time and energy to do it. That's the initial stage, runs till roughly 2015. Then I had, I think, like the 2015 to 20 era, which I think was defined by accumulating more volume. The tests got a little bit harder, and the games continued to one-up itself. There's a lot of intricacies to each one of these things, and like the athletes who represent these eras and the workouts and movements that I think defined them. But broadly speaking, that one ends in 2020. 2020 to 2023 is like the professionalization era, and the skills and weights jumped up pretty considerably. More folks are going full-time at this point, and the athlete profile changed a little bit. And then since 2023, it's more been a machine and size question, as we have more access to machines that didn't exist a decade ago, and they're more commonly incorporated into events and programming, and the programming is reflected. The programming reflects and maybe rewards people who have proficiency with extremely high loads and ability on the machines. So that's my theory, but it was more like, that's how I see things and how I've evolved, you know, how I've tried to respond as an athlete. But I think it's more interesting to ask how coaches have evolved their training and if they see it similarly. So,
yeah. So I guess circling back to what I was saying is basically that is like the elite athlete lens. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, wow, this is a really good model. Like I haven't really thought about what the athletic characteristics of each era are. I've always thought like, what are the programming characteristics with the athletes I'm working with, and how do I tailor their program to work on those specific things? But from a coaching lens, I think my eras are a little bit different in terms of like, what did I have to focus on with the majority of people that I worked with? Because, in the beginning, it's you have 2 elite athletes and 38 people who are striving or trying to get up there or younger or in development. And I feel like that first stage, like the earlier adopter stage, it was a focus on very siloed things. So it was like, you need to work on your ability to attain skills. I would bucket that as like movement. Like people couldn't do a snatch. They couldn't do double unders. They didn't know how to swim. They didn't know how to back squat. They had no access to technical information and knowledge. And I think the coaching competence that got built there, at least for myself, was teaching people how to build structured plans for very delineated qualities. Like you needed to get your back squat up, or you needed to get your 2K row better. You needed to learn a specific skill. Then at some point, I think in that next era shift, it was volume tolerance. It was like, all right, well now people got to either, they have that requisite level of skill, but they need to be able to get better at all of them all at once. And it started to becoming program design, started to becoming like Murph was at the games. There's 6 workouts in the open that you have to repeat, that like to be successful, you have to do hundreds and hundreds of contractions. And volume tolerance became a major limitation for people. So how do you get people to do a full strength program, a full endurance program, a full Metcon style program all in one thing? And it started, the major limitation in the aggregate was like, how do people just not break down handling this? Like the best of the best can integrate all of it, but most of the rest of the population was like, how do you build the resilience and robustness to get here? The third era, I feel like, I think of it more as like the COVID era. And it was more like, how do you manage the practicality of training people, because they don't have access to the equipments. They don't have competitions to go to build their sport specific skills. They don't have the motivation and clarity as to what the season looks like. They don't know when they're playing, what they're playing. And then this next one, I'm kind of calling like next level performance / media. Like it's like the professionalization of now you have athletes that's like, well, this is all you do, and how do you make an income doing it? So I think the eras, I wouldn't really go against them. I think my coaching learning just kind of like mirrored that in some capacity. It was like in the beginning, I didn't really know how to build volume tolerance with all the things. So I was learning how to do it. And then when the next generation came, I'm like, oh, well, I kind of know how to do that. And you're like at the stage that these athletes were 5 years ago. So I can kind of use that model to upgrade and move forward.
Do you think the volume tolerance is still as important now?
Yes, I do. I just think our methods for being able to attain that volume tolerance, or my understanding of how to do it, is just better. Like back then I used to think like, oh, well, you need to be able to do, 150 chest to bar pull-ups in 10 minutes mixed with other stuff, or you need to be able to do this amount of miles of running. And I didn't have tools for people that it didn't work for. So like in an ideal scenario, you just have somebody that could just do that many chest to bars and run that much. But in a real world setting, most people's like their knees start hurting, their ankles start hurting, their hips start getting bothersome, so they can't do their squat progressions. So now I have more ways to like add in isometrics. I know better understanding of endurance, low intensity methods to pair. I have better peak timing. So I think volume tolerance is more important, but as a coach, it's less of an intellectual limitation because I know how to build resilience over time, as opposed to like, I think when you're younger in general as a coach or an athlete, you just like, I'm gonna go after this thing, and I would just almost like the solution to getting better at volume was giving more volume, and it broke a lot of people, to be honest. But it also helped like elevate the game for the people that could sustain that.
Yeah, I was looking back at some of my old programs and trying to remember like the thought process behind a lot of them back in 2013, 2014, 2015, and the things that stood out to me, the themes that stood out to me was everything was very categorized and siloed and periodized. And I think maybe it was necessary at that time, mostly from where I was at in my coaching journey. Like that was just how I thought. Like I had to have rigidity, I had to have repeatability, I had to have metrics that I could define and then chase. But I think the sport and the athletes over time taught me that you needed to have more flexibility also. So like as way back then, everybody was on the same calendar. Like it was just the open season that mattered. There might be one or two offshoot competitions that happened, but picture that to the landscape now where the top athletes in the sport are competing at 5 different huge qualifiers. If you go on Competition Corner, there's probably 50 competitions coming up this weekend. So flexibility is the biggest thing that I think that I've changed in my coaching career, just making sure that one, the athlete is ready for basically like they carry around this level of general preparedness at any given time. So there's less of an off season that seems to be happening across the board. But two, the demands of even these lower level competitions is through the roof compared to back then. Like you can't afford to just like isolate one specific quality for 6 to 8 months at a time like we used to do way back then. It's probably the biggest change that I've noticed. But the volume tolerance is a big one that also has changed. Like going back and looking and being like, oh man, 50 to 60 chest to bar in a workout, like that's good. Like 2012, 2013, like you get that regional level, like all right, and then past that, like hey, you're on your own. But like now it's like to even like the price of admission to get into play is like you have to have 120 chest to bars, same amount toe to bar, maybe even higher on GHD setups, like the amount of hinging volume that they're doing inside of a workout. But like what Max is saying is like, I wouldn't say that the approach of making somebody resilient has changed, but I think the tools have changed a little bit. I think the way that we think about building resilience, the way that I think about categorizing the amount of movements that I put into somebody's training week, that's just kind of matured and evolved a little bit more for me over the years.
I'd also be curious thinking like, I know like the cream of the crop top tier people are just like good at everything and kind of better across the board. But if you did rechange the testing architecture back to what looked more like classic CrossFit, so 95-pound thrusters, toes to bar, burpees, not as much machines that like a static bike favors a bigger person. A bike on the road doesn't favor a bigger person because it's your power relative to like the friction and gravity requirements as well to balance your body weight. So if you did have a testing architecture that just went back towards more like high volume, high repetition, open and or quarterfinal things being lighter and more accessible, I don't know if those types of fitness metrics have gotten better at the same rate as just like 1RM strength development and like a 2K row, for example. Like I think if you took the top 100 people in the world and you did a 2K row now versus a 2K row back then, I think you're talking about like 20, 30 seconds improvement at like pretty regular, like for almost everyone at the top.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think you'd see that if you did like Mary right now or you did Murph right now. I don't know if the times on aggregate would be as much improved.
I think you're spot on. Like the proficiency for fitness in a box hasn't super jumped up. And the thing that stands out to me is Colton Mertens destroyed everybody in the Open this year. He's got an insane level of fitness that lends itself really well to, like traditional style CrossFit. He redid Friendly Fran, and I don't think he beat Matt's time.
No, he did, I think.
He did beat Matt's time?
Yeah, he did.
Okay, then I was off on that. Yeah. Excuse me.
But it was close. It was close. I think he was like just sub 3. I watched that video.
I watched it. Super, super impressive. Having listened to podcasts before, like lots of times I think we get to hear about the stuff that's worked, but what's something that you remember trying in the past, like as an intervention for one of your athletes that did not work? If you have any of those that you remember to share.
Dude,
let me get my scroll.
Most of the time. What's funny, because like it won't work for somebody, but it'll work for somebody else. So a lot of it is just experimentation, especially with new people. But I'd say like thematically, the one thing that I've tried to figure out as best I can, and maybe it's just because I'm dense, I very rarely can get the good adaptations out of zone 2 training with my CrossFitters that everybody preaches like is so beneficial. It's something that I struggle with. I struggle with the time demand for it, trying to justify the time spent on zone 2 training that's necessary to actually get improvements versus the time that could be spent on skill refinement or movement efficiency or mobility or even just recovery in general. But I also struggle with the trade-off of how much time do you need to be spending there versus the time in working areas. But the times where I've try to convince myself to be patient with it, to try and convince myself to say like, this is what they need, especially for this like avatar of athlete. I don't see the bang for the buck that I'd like to have seen. So more often than not, even when I know that like this is kind of like good training for them, it's an intervention that I haven't had a ton of success with.
Chandler's going to fight you on that.
I know, but that's like, it's like the one thing, like it's one of the things that stands out to me is like, I know that Chandler does a ton of it, and like, I know that there's benefit to it. And I know that other people get good benefit out of it. I've just never had like a good track record with it for whatever reason.
Mine is the complete opposite side of the spectrum. So in the beginning days of the sport, and I'd say probably like 13 to 18 type years. So at that time, a lot of my coaching was like the couple of people in the elite, and then everybody else was on the bubble, like wanting to get to that next level. And a huge percentage of those people just like pure and simple were not strong enough. It was like, hey, these clean ladders end at 315 or 225 cleans for guys and girls. Like you have to be able to cycle that weight while you're tired to even be somewhat competitive, and that's above your 1RM. So like you had to help people get stronger. And I think there were like 3 or 4 distinct people that I was like, hey, if you want to get to the next level, you got to get stronger, like period. And I've tried running strength programs that are balanced, that have strength plus your conditioning plus all your other stuff. It's not moving the needle enough. Let's go pure strength and just get you stronger. And I ran that, and I've never really had the success in, they've gotten stronger, but then when you bring them back to the sport, just adding the sport stuff back in pulled the 1RMs back down, and they had lost so much fitness that like the net overall aggregate, if it's just simple, like, all right, strength and conditioning, we prioritized strength and got them stronger, and they got less condition. And then by the time I tried to re-peak them, it was like they both kind of were like back to lower level. So I have found a lot more now when I write training programs, I try to do everything I can to keep things balanced. So even if I go heavy strength, I'll do zone 2 and skill volume accumulation, thinking like, all right, I'm still going to give you endurance adaptations and skills and movements that are required for the sport, but it's going to be at such a low level of intensity that hopefully it doesn't conflict with the strength work, versus just saying like, let's pull it all out.
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar in a way, because one of the things that always led me to believe that the intervention wasn't working was the ability to express it in the sport, which for you is like the strength expression, right? Like they absolutely got stronger on some of those progressions, like the 1RMs drove up, but their expression inside the sport maybe struggled a little bit, or at least compared to what you were expecting. I think it was the same way. Like to take somebody who is, I think, needed to get aerobically more fit, or just be able to trust their engine a little bit more, to take them through a zone 2 progression, I wasn't seeing the expression that I wanted out of that time. So the return on investment wasn't there enough for me to say like, this was worth me peeling things about that far apart and then trying to build them up.
Yeah. Another intervention, or I don't even know if it's an intervention, but maybe it's like a stylistic way of approaching communication. I think my background in life and sport was very intense, and there's a machismo level of coaching that's in a lot of combat, football, whatever, that borderlines on abusive language when you push people. Don't be a pussy type stuff, a lot of just pushing people through pain without any empathy or understanding of like, well, sometimes that's okay to do, sometimes it's not, sometimes you do have to be harsh, but you could be harsh without having to use that type of language. And, Travis is probably the person I spent the time most with. So I moved out here in 2015. And at that time, me and him spent a lot of time on the floor doing everything together, breaking down movements, workouts, paces, anything that he was weak at. We'd have priority sessions, and I'd come out and I'd watch them. And I think that language and that approach was good for a period of time, but then it started to actually change and undermine his own psychological self-talk and way of dealing with that stuff under pressure. And with Travis, it was like very noticeable because I was with him all the time. But with other people, it would be like, I'd work with someone, they submit their results and like their initial consult stuff, and they're like, I want to make it to the games. And I'd be like, you're never going to make the games, change your goal, or I'm not working with you. Like I was just very, very blunt and straightforward. And I think over time I've realized like, that's just not the way. Maybe people can work that way, but it was not an intervention that worked positively for me to get the rewards, because I wasn't doing it from a place of hatred. It's not like I was trying to do it abusively. I was doing it to try to help people get better and elevate and be clear on their goals. Like if it wasn't clear, I wanted them to have an honest take. But I think I've learned over time that like communication, how you say things, what the personality type of the person that you're saying them to, like Noah was a very stark contrast from Travis, because he was like, wow, I've never had tough love like that from a coach. And I remember being like, tough love, like I just
going easy on you.
Yeah, yeah. So that was an intervention that definitely I've just shifted over the years. Maybe I've shifted the spectrum too much and gotten soft. But
I would be the exact opposite of that.
You are?
Yeah, no, I would say I'm too soft on people most of the time. I'm very willing to allow them to take the easy road more often than not. I know that it's my bias as a human and the personality that I have. It's funny. I remember one of the first conversations I had with you.
I coached
when
Adam,
you were
by the
coaching
way.
me back in 2012 was the sport's passing you by. You're getting old. You're not gonna make regionals. And I was like, okay, will you still coach me? But I remember thinking
2012, the sport's passing you by. You must have really been a pussy.
Well, I mean, like Chandler said back then, it was really just the early adopters. Like I was good enough, I was fit enough that I could just outsmart people. But now they're fit enough that it doesn't matter how smart I am now.
Welcome to.
Happens to us all. Father Time's undefeated.
I was coaching already at that point, and I remember you saying that to me, and I remember the impact that it had on me, and just like the resetting of expectations and being like, man, that was valuable. Like I needed to hear that, and I need to be willing to have that conversation with other people. So it's kind of like, I know that personality wise, like it's hard for me to say those kinds of things, even to like, not only just my athletes, but even like my kids sometimes. Like I see that coming out. It's like, oh no, it's okay. Like we'll get them next time. But the more often that I push myself to be a little bit more hardline, to have people expect a little bit more out of themselves, that's like, I feel like the impact is a little bit better from an athlete standpoint, at least.
Our pendulums are swinging.
Yeah, we're kind of different. We might have the same haircut, but we're kind of different.
I think the balance is good, because it can lead to being abusive, and it can also, if on both ends, the extremes don't lead to the most competitive versions of athletes. So the fact that you guys have a bunch of different people in the house keeps the biases on either side, I think, from overwhelming the other. And regarding biases, I feel
you've had some good segues, man.
I'm trying to think ahead on my feet while we're doing these. I spent much time earlier this year doing a bunch of running for High Rocks and some training outside of the CrossFit space. WFP is its own entity as well that trains a little bit differently, and you guys train athletes in all sorts of different ventures. I know there's some stuff with golf. There's some regular like high school athletes here as well, and so across all of these, everyone has their own semi way of applying fitness. CrossFit has the 10 domains. The Army has its 10 domains. Like there's many different ways that people categorize fitness, but across all of the spaces that you all coach in, what is like a capacity or manner of expressing fitness that you feel like is over-tested, and what is one that you feel like is under-tested? If you were the president of all fitness and you got to be like, I'm going to throw this thing in, like every football game is going to begin with thrusters, like because
I would resign. I wouldn't want the smoke that comes from that. Hold on, but before I answer the question, what are the Army's 10?
I don't remember them off the top.
Okay.
They
Similar?
seem similar enough to CrossFit. They differ in enough ways, but it was part of this holistic health and fitness initiative that came about in 2017, and they were really big on it for a while. Then, like most things, it kind of fell to the wayside. It might still be something that's preached, but it didn't have the effect that I think it wanted to. When they changed the fitness test to the Army Combat Fitness Test, the part of the metrics of why the Combat Fitness Test with its 6 events was better than the Army Physical Fitness Test with its 3 events was because these 6 events ostensibly tested all the categories of fitness, and the push-up, sit-up, and 2-mile run did not.
Got it. So the question was, what are the over-tested and what are the under-tested methods?
You can go
in
fitness, in broader training. Like you can be as broad or as limited as you want it to be.
Broad is a harder question. I think within the CrossFit space, I would say the potential over-tested would be, I kind of had it listed as I use the 10 general skill model. So CrossFit has strength, power, speed, stamina, cardio, then balance, agility, coordination, accuracy, flexibility as 10 things. Of those 10 things, I would say stamina, cardio, and maybe strength but stamina and cardio, I would say is like, I call it over-tested because it's like, well, every test is limited by that. If you're actually trying to get an expression of speed, true power, then having somebody at 190 beats per minute heart rate is not going to allow them to express that. So you're not necessarily testing that. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying I want to change the CrossFit Games testing, but I think just if I were to look at the test and say like, what does this self-select for the most? It would be like the cardiorespiratory and muscular adaptations that are required for a ton of volume. So I would say that if you wanted all 10 of these equal things or 10 of these things to be tested equally, right now, those two are like turned up on the dial a lot more than the others, just from my perspective.
I'm sorry, I was smiling. It reminded me of like, there's a couple people I remember back in the day. Obviously, my technique on some stuff is unconventional, and folks would like fuss at me. Yeah, that's a nice way to say it. Hey man, it's broadly worked. I'm still here. But some folks would, say like, oh, you got to do more stretching. I said, nobody's ever flexibility or accuracy their way to the games. Like,
yes,
I will beat you because have more stamina and I'm stronger than you. So you can take your nutrition and all that stuff, like, and put it some notes out, because I'm going to do more fitness and I'm going to beat you at the test. But that's what I like. Yeah, it is. We have these 10, but really we're training for 3 or 4 of them.
Yes, I think so. And I would say the ones, so power and speed, I'd say actually get more love and test in the testing dynamic, or more than the ones I'm about to say, but less than stamina cardio. I think the balance, agility, coordination, accuracy, flexibility, like that 5 category, which I put like in my head, I think of that as movement, hand-eye coordination, reacting to something that's happening to you in front that's not practiced. Like when you do a Metcon, even if you're practicing a snatch for balance sake, you've done 1,000 of them. But an athlete who's able to express balance is oftentimes able to express that in a pattern they've never practiced, in a random place with their head off the center line, bent over, reaching for something. And in order to construct a testing dynamic that tests that, oftentimes you need like games, hand-eye coordination, table tennis, combat, something that requires your midline to be off center, your spine to reorient, reach. And I don't think that's really ever tested in functional fitness. It's very rarely tested.
The thing that I said was undertested in the sport of fitness. I'm sorry, I didn't think about broad fitness in general, but the sport of fitness, I think undertested is general athleticism is what I said. And I think the best way that you can test something like that is like an obstacle course.
Yeah, the O course has done a decent job of that because it was climbing, jumping, running,
but it's what you said. Things. It's like unknown. It's moving my body through this space that I've never experienced before, trying to do it fast, but I have to be balanced. I have to be coordinated. There's some aspects where I might need to be flexible, but all of that to me, it takes us out of the box of, like you were saying, like fitness in a phone booth, right? Like all these things that I've done thousands of times before, can I do them faster than the person next to me? That's good. You need that for a test, especially like just to be able to test like just pure go. I think that we need to test, well, maybe not that. I think that athleticism should be tested more often. I think that there's a lot of really, really good CrossFitters, but I don't think that every CrossFitter is a good athlete. And I think that it would probably...
Definitely not.
I think that it would lend itself a little bit more towards like the credence of the fittest on earth. If like we can show like we're good athletes too, like we can do beach runs and obstacle courses and strongman tests and all these other things that instead of just the same 16 movements repeated in different rep schemes.
I will say, I think that's something as I've stepped more outside of the CrossFit space, like, there's always going to be a disconnect between internal messaging and external messaging, but I feel that there's a sense of superiority in the fact that we have, some mastery over a bunch of all the stuff within the 10 domains. But if you go to anybody outside of the gym and you can't shoot a basketball, they do not care like what your snatch is or how many burpees you do. It's like you're a bad athlete and whatever you're doing in the gym sucks because you can't express it.
You're a good CrossFitter, but I'd argue that you're not a good athlete.
I mean, do you think a caveat there might be, to argue the other way, is that if you are a CrossFitter and then you're learning some athletic skill, you might acquire it quicker than someone who wasn't?
I would say
yes, the regularly learn and play new sports thing. I just don't know how often that's actually applied.
I don't know. I've seen CrossFitters throw softballs in a competition before. It didn't go well.
Yeah. It's hard, and I think like if haters are going to jump on this video, it's probably going to be the people looking at somebody who's like, hey, this is the cream of the crop CrossFitter, and look, they can learn a new skill quickly. But I think if you took the broad base of people and you said, all right, you're an affiliate member who's been training 5 days a week for 5 consecutive years, doing stuff inside the box, the training adaptations that you can get can actually make it harder to learn those new skills, because the spinal stiffness and rigidity that you have to get if you're on 2 feet doing bilateral work all the time and you're losing the ability to rotate your spine against itself. Like for myself, I do a lot of stuff that rotates, and then it's harder for me to do the bilateral work as strong as I used to be, because like I'm not as stiff as I used to be. So I have to give up some of the strength to be able to maintain my rotational capacity to play golf and strike and do spinning back kicks and stuff like that. If I wanted to be stronger and better expressing fitness in CrossFit, I'd have to stop doing this to do more CrossFit. And I think I don't think that people that are just more fit through the lens of hard metcons regularly would learn athletic skills quicker than somebody that's just doing general strength and conditioning stuff. Like if they're
general athleticism,
or just playing games, like just going to play and pick up basketball.
We've seen it lots of times when we invite people from the gym to do spike ball.
Yeah, spike
brutal.
ball. Yeah,
they just can't.
Yeah,
they just can't.
You also don't train it too. Like hand-eye coordination is a skill that's not really ever trained in the box. If you say holding onto a wall ball like this and hitting a target that's that big is like a hard it's only a hard test of hand-eye coordination because you got to do 150 in a row and your shoulders are tired. Yeah. But like the actual accuracy requirement of hitting that is it's just not trained as much.
I can get on board with the idea that some CrossFit-based physical adaptations might prevent you from picking up like a outside of the gym skill. The one thing that I would say that might go against that is if you get somebody who hasn't worked out regularly, who's relatively inactive and sedentary, and you get them in the gym and you get them moving, they're probably more likely to go try. They're probably like more like to trust their body, to want to explore what they're capable of, to be willing to say yes to somebody who invited them to spike ball or pickleball. So even if they might not like pick up the skill of it and be good at it, they're probably a little bit more likely and potentially able to go out and do the activity.
Yeah. I'll backtrack on what I said too. If we're comparing that person to somebody who's not doing anything, then yes, they'll learn the skill way quicker. If they're just fit and conditioned and then learning the other athletic skill, yes, they'll learn it faster.
I think there's a lot. Sorry.
No, that was Jeff.
I feel like there's a lot of discourse in the space too about, how soon people should specialize. There's some folks, especially on the dude side, like a lot of these guys are coming up and they competed as teens. They've been doing it for a long time. And so maybe now that the sport is in a different era than it was 10 years ago, perhaps that's the best way of preparing. But I'd be interested in hearing, like, if you guys had a 15-year-old athlete or someone of that age and, they're complete tabula rasa and you have the goal of trying to get them to the games or a similar type event within a 10 to 15 year period, like how would you structure that? Would you have them play regular sports for a little bit? Are you going to introduce these concepts early? Which sport do you have them pick? Like all that sort of stuff. Maybe you can differentiate. Maybe you can answer for dudes, you can answer for ladies if the answer might be different there, but I would be curious as to how you think you create the fittest person according to the 10 domains that we frame stuff as people who've done CrossFit for a while.
Would it be the build their fitness according to the domains or set them up for success in the sport or both?
I would say both. I suppose both. We're all athlete influencers or like that sort of thing. So
yeah. Do you want to start?
Sure.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think so. Especially if it's a female, I think that the long gymnastics background is probably one of the most beneficial things that I would say needs to be there. Just knowing what it does to strength to body weight ratio, what it does to body awareness in space, and then what we were just talking about, what it does to skill acquisition, like the ability to be able to do all of those three things at a high level. All of the girls who have a gymnastics background excel at that. I would probably say not necessarily competitive gymnastics. The other thing that goes along with that is all of the tumbling routines that they have to do and the pounding that it takes and like what ends up happening to their lower backs over time. Everybody almost to a T, if you spent time in gymnastics, you're going to have some low back issues that happen, whether it's gymnastics or acrobatics or even like cheerleading, tumbling. So I think there's benefits to be had out of that, where even like a 15-year-old, you're not thinking about competitive gymnastics because there's girls that have been doing it since they were 4. If you're starting gymnastics, you're probably taking gymnastics classes regularly, getting the benefits of, like we were talking about, strength to body weight ratio, lots of isometric holds that a lot of the class members might have skipped in their preparation, and then also just the ability to be able to break down a skill and build it up over time. All of that's really beneficial. I think to supplement that, I would probably do something like swimming. I think swimming, you get You get the cardiovascular response, which I think is good. You get a ton of shoulder mobility in terms of like strength and range of motion in certain areas, which I don't think you get in other endurance sports. And I also think that if you do just running or if you do just biking, like it's kind of like swimming is kind of like mobility-based endurance when I think about it. And so like to have more freedom of motion when you're thinking about a sport like CrossFit, where you have to be able to put your arms overhead regularly, comparing that to a runner who has piss poor thoracic mobility and shoulder flexion, that's like, I would bias towards that as an endurance sport. So I think gymnastics, swimming, and then once they got both of those two things down, then I start to put a barbell in their hands. But that might be a couple of years later.
Sounds like you just created Amanda Barnhart.
She is so damn impressive with everything that she does. But I think like the swimming background is huge. I mean, she's naturally strong. I remember watching her and Tia do that clean ladder. What year was that?
19.
Was it 19 or was it 21?
Yeah, I think it was. Well, I'm not going to, my memory's not good enough to put it on the line.
Yeah. But I think if I'm trying to create a background for somebody who wants to have a long and successful future in CrossFit, it's probably including some mix of those things.
Do you have a size profile? Sorry to cut you off. Do you have a size profile you'd also like assign to that, or like any physiological or anthropometric like specifications you would also, if we're creating this person in the lab?
I think maybe like somewhere between 5'6" and 5'8", probably like 145 to 155.
That's girls.
Be
a small guy.
And guys.
Chandler, you gotta lose 40 pounds.
I could get down.
Yeah.
If I had to make weight again, I could do it.
All right, so I had a different group of sports. So I started with a 15-year-old. I assume they're starting freshman year of high school. I'm putting them on the track and field team and making them do decathlon. The reason I chose that is because I think the ability to be in a high pressure moment and execute a skill is a really important thing in CrossFit. So if you're playing a sport that requires you to do that 10 times every time you play, you're getting a lot of reps on the performance anxiety that comes with stepping up to a new task and having to race with it. I think it helps to train speed, power, linear velocity, jumping, throwing, and a lot of things that by the time they're mature as a CrossFitter will no longer be necessary and trained. But when you build those skills in a developmental brain, I think they stay longer. So in the event that they do get to the top level and need to start then adding some of that crazy stuff, it's established in their motor systems. Throwing is powerful as a thing in terms of core to extremity control. So I thought that could be a good base sport to play in school. And then there's the mile run component to it at the end. So there's enough just like of the gritty conditioning that's required. So I thought that was where I would start with the school sport. And then in their CrossFit program, I had Olympic weightlifting as a like base of the program. And then their CrossFit program, I had the same as Adam, gymnastics, calisthenics, and body weight as the main focus. Like a lot of teaching of strict pull-ups on the rope, into legless rope climbs, handstand holds, freestanding, into handstand walks, into wall walks, and all of the capacities on the rings to hold yourself up and developing all of that. And then from a sport perspective, I said at least one annual online qualifier, whether that's like the Open or a Wadapalooza teen type thing every year, where you try to go in person and just develop the competition fun in the space. After they graduate from high school, they transition out of organized sport, and they have some form of triathlon style program where they mix all the machines with swimming. It doesn't need to be triathlon, but I use that as kind of like this covers 3 of the modalities. You might want to say put rowing in there or something as well. A full spectrum strength program. So we kind of move from the just weightlifting, which would have some slow lifting, and now we add a little bit of strongman, we add kettlebells and all of that stuff, and add a second competition cycle per year. So they have 2 big competition times. And then I was thinking they graduate from college and then they kind of turn pro and they go full CrossFit training with. And I say in that realm, it's got to be very individual specific. Like Annika cannot train the same way as you, even though you're both elite athletes trying to be at the top of the sport. So by the time they're 8 years into their development, all of those things will probably play out. Like, oh, this person needs a little bit more endurance, or this person needs a little bit more gymnastics. And then you kind of build the season based on how they are. So that's my kind of like, I guess that's like a 10-year plan to go from baby to
neither
pro.
of y'all had any car waxing. Was that intentional?
Wax on, wax off. I'm not Mr. Miyagi, man.
So going along the idea of early specialization, do you guys see any value to having somebody who's aspiring competitive CrossFitter to play other team sports?
That's what I was actually thinking. I was, for both of you guys, was like no college sports, and I'm biased because I had the college sports background, but I feel from a skills standpoint for everything outside of, if you're just looking to maximize direct skills on the floor, then practice is going to be the best way to do it. But I feel like I learned a lot about how to be a member of a team and like
Life.
Yeah, life in general. And I, like, that wasn't the question, so I guess it's kind of a gotcha there. But I think that's the thing that you'd miss out the most on. From
Absolutely, I agree with that. As we were talking, I was like, I wonder where team sports would fit into this equation.
I mean, I was thinking that the track and field is kind of a team individually sport, but in high school. But I think
no college sports.
Yeah, and I kind of went away from it just because I think, so if you did that and you played a college sport, you're going to be doing, especially if it's at a higher level, you're going to be doing all the practices plus all the weight room time plus all the mandatory work study or whatever study hall time. You almost have a full-time job to manage your academic workload plus your collegiate sport workload. So I think from the time you're 18 to 22, you don't really develop well for the sports specificity. So if you did do that, I think you're saying that they start to develop their peak 3 or 4 years then after they stop their college sports. So I think in today's era, that's not really as feasible as it was in the previous ones, because like you were 25, 26 when the sport was like kind of getting started.
I do wonder,
that top
though,
level.
If you're able to get 4 years of basically being a professional athlete at a cost that's mostly subsidized if you're a scholarship athlete. Like if that's how you view it, then what sport would you pick for someone who, was still hoping to try to become a professional fitness athlete after graduation, but they, in order to afford all the food that you need to eat and all the access to training equipment and all that sort of stuff, like they had to pick a sport. What sport would you guys pick then?
I mean, I've never done it, but it honestly might be something like wrestling, I think. Like I think the grit that goes into wrestling and the idea of like the amount of mental pain that goes into it, like, I don't know. I feel like every person that I've worked with that has a wrestling or grappling background just has a different sort of mindset around hard training pieces.
Yeah. I don't know. I would think maybe you could chime in on this since you did it more, but I don't know on the whole if like your hips, knees, back, shoulders, positions transfer well. It's just a lot of being bent over, being hunched, being in flexion, shoulders rolled forward. I would think Chandler is probably more of an exception of somebody that does that at a high level and comes into here and can still move and access the positions. Yeah. I think. I haven't movement screened all of them. So but
talking to Kiera's husband, Billy, who's a better wrestler than I was, a couple times in the qualifier, and he was like, can you straighten your arms out over your head? I remember that being a thing that some other folks had asked me to do, because you spend so much time when you take a shot getting sprawled on and like, you're out. So like the ability to even like straighten your arms is something that most, I won't say most, but many folks in the space lose. So I do think you can kind of get smashed out, and especially because there's some aspects of malnutrition involved there and dehydration in order to make weight, where I feel like if you did it healthily and maybe did it with the knowledge in mind that you're going to move to something else, then it could be done. But especially at the Division I level, I don't know if that's the case.
Also not an option. Oh no, now it is an option for women.
I don't know if it's Division I yet, but I know West Wind's getting a team.
There are like college
teams.
College teams.
I would say rowing. I love rowing as a sport and modality.
I was actually thinking if you had the right person, something like soccer, because you could, I don't think it would be detrimental. You could maybe chime in here, but if you said, hey, you're going to play soccer, but when you're in the gym, you're still going to train your upper body and get big and strong because you're transferring out of it. So you get all of the adaptations of just running. I think as long as they're like in a position that requires sprint recovery and being on your feet, I think you get a lot of the endurance adaptations for running that transfer. And then you could do more weight room stuff with them just based on the dynamic of the sport.
Yeah, I did zero weight training all the way through college. They would give us a program and then just throw us in the gym and we would just F around the whole time.
You probably regretted that when you decided to CrossFit. Damn, I should have lifted
I get out of college,
more.
I still can't do a strict pull-up. That was my life. It was wild.
But do you think, like in hindsight now, if you could go back to your 18-year-old self and do all of the full spectrum strength training on top of your soccer, it would have made you better at soccer? or not? It's too
I don't know
skilled.
if better at soccer. I definitely would have been in better shape coming out of it, and I don't think it would have been a detriment to soccer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might not make you better, but it would help in
Yeah.
the transfer.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you were in the weight room all the day, you would be really crappy at Halo now. So
It's true. I spent a lot of time on Halo when I was in
Nice.
college.
Nice.
And now you get to reap the benefits.
Yes.
That was a good investment.
What would you have done? I know you said you weren't answering the questions, but come on, just give it to us.
I think rowing's the only other sport I would have done outside of wrestling. Our rugby team at school, like they had a lot of camaraderie, and I think from a team building and learning to be a regular person standpoint, like you can kind of silo yourself in wrestling. I was spending so much time cutting weight and working out by myself that I think being at West Point didn't help. So like all the social skills I should have been building were not getting built, and maybe you could have done some more of that with rugby. But I think from just the time domain that rowers train and how much long, slow distance training those guys do, and how they got to be up early and that sort of stuff for me. And also as somebody who's maybe not naturally, doesn't have a huge natural proclivity towards being sick on the machines or being hyper aerobic, that would have been helpful for me as an athlete. And I encouraged my brother to row a bunch, and he powerlifted instead. Broke his back. He got really strong, broke his back. So
the genes expressing there through your choices. You're like,
I was like, please do this. It would have been the best thing. He's basically an avatar of me, and it didn't work out. But, speaking of that, like there was something, because I was training, like I had this goal in 2012. I wrote down I want to make the games in 2022. So all through college, I was spending time not doing wrestling stuff and not being as good as I should have been, because I wanted to do burpees and stuff in the corner. And I think that did help me maybe when it was time to switch, but didn't really help with my wrestling career. But I've always thought through things in the term of training currency, because my early years were also spent working a job that had really considerable hours. And that was the reason why when I first started working with you, I had to back off, because I was like, Max, I can't do any of the stuff that you're sending me because I don't have time or the equipment and that stuff. And so training currency is something I think a lot about, and especially it's why I spend so much time trying to guess, even now when I have more time available, what events are going to program. And I know coming up, I have WFP is likely going to have swimming, it seems like, for the finals. And it's not something I generally prioritize, because from a training currency standpoint, I think it's somewhat limited. So it was interesting to hear you guys say that. But if you're working with an athlete who's extremely, training limited, and this kind of is a variation of what I was asking earlier, but I think it's just how I kind of view fitness. If they can only do, one monostructural movement, one weightlifting movement, one gymnastics movement, what are you giving them? And you can do a primary and secondary too. It doesn't have to necessarily just be one, but like, what are you feeling is giving people the most bang for their buck, especially for folks who are time disadvantaged, which is pretty much everybody who's not a professional.
Yeah. I have two for each category, and I was thinking of it not in like primary, secondary, but I was thinking of it in goal. So like CrossFit for the methodology, just trying to get fit to be a fit human, and then CrossFit for sport. So monostructural, I was thinking Echo Bike for the general person, low impact, both upper body and lower body. You could sprint on it.
No mobility requirements.
No mobility requirement. Anyone can do it.
No technical requirements.
Yeah, very quick to learn. So I would say that. For elites, I would say running. Like it's just you can't not be a good runner anymore, period. Like the actual tests will have running in them, and then the tests that don't have running in them will be dictated by how fast you can run your transitions and run up and down the floor and be on your feet for long periods of time. So I think if you want to be an elite athlete, it's got to be part of the package, unless you're just super gifted in every other area where you could get event wins. For weightlifting, this is for the general person, would be thruster, but I think you might have to make it dumbbell thruster in some capacities for mobility limitations, but it gives you integration of lower body and upper body at the same time, a little bit of coordination in terms of timing of when your knees and hips and arms extend through a range, which could help eventually transfer into things like push jerks and all of that stuff. For an elite athlete, I put snatch just because it's tested a lot. Being able to have the coordination, speed, skill, timing, all of that stuff.
It hits all those
boxes. It just kind of like hits everything.
I
It's kind of like a little bit of strength and mobility. And then for gymnastics, for the regular person, I thought burpee box jump. It has a little bit of pressing, a little bit of hinging, hip extension. You could have them climb up the box and just step up and step down if they're a little bit older. And it could hit a lot of general fitness things, if you chose a pull-up or a toes to bar or a wall walk or any of the real advanced gymnastic skills, I feel like 80% of the regular people just kind of get washed out, can't do those things. And then for a elite, I had muscle up, and I was thinking start with strict muscle up before you're allowed to do kipping. So if that means isometrics, eccentrics, because it has both pulling and pressing, a little bit of core control, and then you could advance it into actually getting a cardiovascular stimulus as well when they get good enough to do it. So those are my 3 reductionist movements.
Nice. I tried to do it. I didn't do the segment into elite and general population, so it's going to be a little bit more simplistic, I think.
Elite though? You chose?
No, so this is for everybody.
Okay.
If I had one modality to be able to train monostructural, I think I'm going to use a rower. I think that I'm going to use a rower. I know that there's a technical restriction that might go into doing it well, but I've trained enough people in their 60s and 70s to know that you can work around that you can get really good strength endurance on it. Legs and arms can both be targeted individually if you really want to break the stroke down. 2, you actually do build mobility as you go. I think that the ability to be able to flex and extend the knees and the hips at the same time, to be able to understand the sequencing of that is really beneficial for a lot of people. And then also when you go on there for a long time, you're getting aerobic nerds as well. So I think you can get strength adaptations. I think you can get mobility adaptations. And I think that you definitely get endurance adaptations. For the sport, I think it's also like that hinging sort of pulling pattern is something that we use all the time anyways. Like hinging is just one of the main categories inside of the sport. So being able to have good volume inside of that pattern is going to have good carryover compared to being on a bike or being on a ski erg or something else. So I thought the applicability for an athlete might carry over as well. Modality for gymnastics, I didn't pick a movement. I picked a piece of equipment. I said, give me a pair of rings. I think that the things that I can do with a pair of rings, whether you're an athlete or a general population person, are just innumerable.
Toes to rings, planks.
Well, I mean, just
rows.
picture starting with support holds,
Yeah.
like support holds in different variations, hangs in different variations, presses and pulling in different variations, lots of isometric stuff. And then you take that all the way up to what you were saying is like now a ring muscle up, which is like the expression of gymnastics that is probably at the top for us. Rings just have a lot of flexibility for me. So I'd like just hang them in a doorstop, and there's tons that you can do with somebody.
Okay. I give that a thumbs up then. I take back my fart noise.
No, I think you're super spot on. I'm wait till you finish and have an addendum on that.
And then the weightlifting one, I said snatch, and I put an asterisk in there that was snatch, and then dumbbell snatch that didn't have the mobility requirements. Because again, like you can get bottlenecked if the skill isn't there or if the mobility isn't there with certain people. But I think you can get around that pretty easily with a dumbbell. But like Max was saying, all the boxes that he wanted to check with that is why I put it too.
I feel like I had to make a couple of these decisions in the past, specifically when we did our rotation to Europe when I was deployed out there. We didn't have a lot of equipment to bring, so I had to. One of the pieces of equipment I chose were rings, and I did a bajillion kettlebell snatches out there as well because you could pack the kettlebells a little bit easier to pack. And we ended up buying a rowing machine while we were out there as well. So kind of a couple of things you're talking about from like an every person perspective. I feel like those
you basically just did his
it
reductionist program.
You're pretty on point there. And I think the movement that I used the most for the ring specifically, like for gymnastics, was toes to bar, because at the time toes to bar showed up in every open, and like the qualifier side of things was really important for me during that phase of my career. So I needed to get a lot better at them. But after that, I remember when I was doing the programming for the Warrior Fitness team in the Army, the thing I would tell them was that the sport is running. If we can run, back squat, run thruster, and do muscle ups, then we're good at everything else. And I ended up not doing as many thrusts as I wanted to, because I thought I changed and thought the back squats had, I went back and had to read this email, but the back squats had more applicability to all of the lifts. Like if you can back squat 600 pounds, even if your technique is poor, you're probably gonna be able to power clean 225, not necessarily vice versa. And because we were maybe a little bit more limited from a training currency perspective as an organization, we more or less tried to follow that. So I feel like a lot of what you guys said has actually been borne out in the situations where I've had to try to apply it.
If you could back squat 600 pounds, you could probably power clean more than 225.
You know what I mean? Maybe 230. Okay, so kind of related to that, this is the final question I've got. I've been buzzing you guys with a bunch of stuff that I'm just going to take and apply to all my training.
He's going to read back. But this is just his way of getting a consult.
Yes. Yeah, basically. Sweet. Yeah, well, we've got more than an hour locked in. This is awesome for me. If you guys, like everyone talks about hybrid, and the thing that I have as a consumer of a lot of internet media, my only problem with hybrid is that you can basically make up your own definition for anything, and for all of its faults, like there's a nice part of showing up to a competition where everybody's agreed upon, like, hey, this is how you get here, and we're all going to kind of be tested on the same thing, even if there's a barbell bias if you're doing CrossFit, or if there's a running bias and you're doing high rocks. But if you guys were to create your own hybrid test, and I know the Army was able to
Hold on, what is hybrid?
Well, it doesn't have very clear.
Yeah,
does
it's
it,
whatever
right?
you want it to be. It's
It's a
for me,
buzzword?
it's a buzzword, and it's also something that for me, it's a buzzword that allows me to elevate my skills past what I've actually accomplished. So my hybrid category is I am the wrestler in 600-pound deadlift category.
If you can
Out
deadlift
wrestle
600
me and do that, and then also beat me in Fran because AJ Ferrari. Otherwise, you'd be able to take that. Like, you have to make enough categorizations to where only you fit it, and then you can throw it on your Instagram.
Oh, I got one.
People who are 39.
Mine's soccer and Halo. You can get me at one, but probably not the other.
Yeah.
100%.
Wait, what's yours?
You got to do a 6-minute mile on the air runner in Crocs, and then you got to be able to do 17 unbroken Nordic curls.
I knew
See,
Nordic
according
curls.
to your
Yeah, Nordic
definition,
curls
then
were coming in there.
you're
I'm the best hybrid athlete to ever be.
I think the original hybrid, I think, almost came from the Adam Klink thing, which was like 500-pound
sick.
back squat, 5-minute mile,
Yeah.
which I think was a Greg Glassman like prophecy.
Was
or
that in the
whatever.
journal a long
I
time
think
ago?
it
feel like
was. He said like this is going to be something that will be regular amongst
Yeah.
athletes, and it's pretty right.
close,
yeah.
yeah.
But the question was basically like, how would I test for it?
Yeah, if you get 3 tests of, like, it can be anything you want to validate the best athlete according to your standards. What are you coming up with?
Do they have to be capacity based?
They can be whatever you want.
Go ahead.
Guys, I'll take this. I got to pee. Keep going.
Okay.
I think I'm going to go against what I said before with rowing. I'd want to put rowing in there, but I think you have to put a run just because of the precedent of the amount of like volumes and scores that you have available. So I think it's probably something like a 10K run, taking them out a little bit longer to make sure that you're really testing endurance instead of just a 5K. I think 5K, sometimes even powerful people can kind of like grind through that a little bit more.
Through it.
Yeah, I think 10K. I think 10K is like,
Unfortunate for me.
yeah, 10K you stretch that out a little bit, like 38-minute 10K. Like now you're talking.
Yeah.
I think relative strength instead of absolute strength is how I would test it. I think like a 500-pound back squat is super, super impressive, but I almost consider that like you need like there's a price of admission in terms of body weight or body type that can do that.
Yeah.
And so what I'd be interested about is like more of like a relative strength test, like something like it's Linda, where they used a percent of body weight. So it was like 1.5 times deadlift or body weight bench press and then X amount in the
0.75,
clean
I
or
think.
something. Yeah, something like that, where I think like you still have to be able to move some weight, but the weight is relative to your body. I feel like is a better version of like what the hybrid athlete should be capable of.
That's 2.
Oh. Let's see. What's my last one?
Because you definitely have a smaller athlete winning
some sort of power then. So probably like a 5-minute echo or something.
Yuck. Okay.
Yuck. I don't want to participate in your fitness.
I was
10K run, 5-minute echo for calories, Linda, with the bodyweight prescriptions.
Oh, mama.
Okay.
Yeah.
What athlete in the general fitness space do you think is winning that test? Do you think it's different than the CrossFit Games champions, or
Tia's winning on
Yeah,
the
Tia's
winning side. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It might be a little bit different. I think
a smaller guy would definitely do better.
I think
because you get buried on the 5-minute. Like,
but you're 66% of the tests you're going to do better on.
I don't know if the smaller folks are generally running the fastest 10Ks though.
I mean, like when I say smaller, I'm talking about like 185 or 190 pound person doing better than a 220 person.
Yeah.
Because think about the relative strength metric of that. If you're 220, you're going to get hammered.
yeah.
Versus
How much does Yellow Hosta weigh?
Probably 210.
And
220,
Ricky's
yeah,
Ricky's
220.
like 210, 215.
210 probably for Ricky.
Yeah, because they were 1-2 on the run, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of getting hammered, you're going to get hammered in the comments for all the thigh you're showing.
This?
That was like
At least
perfectly tasteful amount.
Bumblebee
right here.
tuna.
Just put
I'm glad you got that. Right.
his name card can just be there.
Just put like a little
Max
smiley face for
Leave
me
it
or
up the whole
something like that. I went through this and I feel like mine would be anti-CrossFitty or less CrossFitty because that's my bias and what I find fun in training. I would come up with some sort of a strength gauntlet that tested strength, power, and speed. So maybe like a slow strength lift, a sled sprint type thing, and a 40-yard dash or a 100-yard dash or something that incorporated all of the strength type characteristics versus just picking one, but in one test would be my strength.
Is there rest between those?
So for your first test, you picked 3 things.
Yeah.
I feel like you cheated.
Okay, fine. Fine. Well, I mean, could it be like a for time with 3 things in there? Like,
I guess.
You got to do
the
like
guy,
a
like, if
lift.
you got a genie, you'd be like, I wish for more wishes.
It is exactly what I do.
Breaking the rules.
Yeah.
All right, all out.
But hold on, your original question that you sent, you deviated for your final hurrah.
Yeah, and now you have to think on your feet.
Yeah.
Welcome to real life,
I
bud.
don't like that at all. Oh, man. From a conditioning, I would do the same type of thing. Like, I think you need I think in one of the previous podcasts, we talked about like a 500 meter row rest into a 10K row or something along those.
Love that setup.
Yeah. I love the idea of being able to have both spectrums tested, because I think, a 5 minute, I feel like there are people that can kind of suffer through that. But if somebody is good in a 1 minute window, that's a totally different type of thing than 5. Like, there's just something different there. Whereas I think if you go really long and you get 1, the people that are net good at both of those probably do 5 well. So I would definitely
Is it not the same people? Like for a row specifically, it's like,
well, yeah, maybe it wouldn't be. Yeah, maybe row wouldn't be a fair one because it's body weight dependent.
It's fair.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
what it is,
yeah. I only get one option of it, and then I would have to try to come up with something that would be an athletic. I've been thinking about this for a long time. Like, if I were to create a fun competition that tested fitness, could you have like a bracket style sport tournament that ranked you based on how you competed against like a pickleball or something like that required low skill to learn? Like, not that you have to play your whole life to learn it. Like, golf is such a niche thing that you got to learn and practice and have clubs or whatever, but something low barrier to entry that tests athleticism, or some form of a obstacle course that within it had some throwing or something that you had to react to dynamically. I think those would be the things that I think would best encompass those 10 skills. It would not be a good spectator sport, and I'm not saying the CrossFit Games should be tested like that, but that's kind of what my bias would be, to try to get something that actually gets the methodology into a test, because I don't think it is right now, personally.
it reminds me a bit of the Nike Spark rating from 15 years ago when I was in high school, and that itself was based off of the combine, which I've seen for the last 25 years. My dad going out to do that, but that sort of all the physical skills that are tested there are relatively low barrier to entry. You do have to learn how to bench press, and you have to know there's skills and practice that can be done to improve it. But from a testing standpoint, pretty much anybody, if you tell them to run 40 yards, like, they can figure it out. They might need to learn how to do their drive phase and when to start raising up and like how to finish and all that sort of stuff. There's technique for everything, but bringing down the barrier to entry as much as possible for a widely applicable test, to me, that's always something that seems important.
What would you do? 3 tests. Think on your feet, man. This is a real world.
I'm the interviewer. You can't do that. Can I just end it?
Sorry, your question is done. We're good.
I like the run. I think the run is really good. I'd probably do a 5-mile run, because that's the Army person in me. We do a bunch of 5-mile runs as tests, and I think there's enough of a penalty for excess body weight. Kind of meets you in the middle there. I don't know. I was gonna do what you did and do like a 3-in-1.
Man, the irony.
I would do a vertical jump to test max power, and there's like a bit of athleticism and timing and coordination for that as well. I think the people you think of who can jump really, really high, they're all relatively decent athletes. And then maybe, I want to say I saw this on Instagram. Noah had sent this to me a while ago. There was like a test of like which of, if you could pick like 600-pound deadlift, 400-pound back squat, all that sort of stuff. I think you'd either need to do like a gymnastics test for the final, and what you choose for this is going to determine the type of athlete you get. Like a max strict pull-ups, like a straight up calisthenic thing that doesn't have the barrier to entry that maybe muscle ups would from a timing standpoint, or a max lift that also doesn't have a huge barrier to entry. And I would probably have that lift be upper body, I suppose, since you already went lower body
Run
with the
and
other
jump.
two things. So like a max bench press or max strict press for the athletes as well. And I think you could have different levels based off of, how technical you wanted to get. But if I was just testing high schoolers and trying to figure out who has some decent potential, like the person who probably does the best on the aggregate of those is going to end up being the person you're probably most capable of moving into all sorts of different athletic directions.
Yeah.
What about
not Tom Brady though?
3
That's true.
CrossFit
very true.
tests to choose to sort elite CrossFitters just based on 3 tests?
It depends on the testing time frame. I think that goes back to the eras question, because Mary, like, if you looked at the finals for the top 10 for the 2019 games looked a certain type of way, and then the top 10 for the 2023 games looked a certain type of way, and the top 10 for the 25 games. So
Like it depends on how they're programming.
yeah, I would say.
What about if it was the 2019 paradigm or era,
Well, I think
or the current era since it's current? 1K row.
Are you trying to like get a result that ends up matching what?
Yeah, like just that it would sort well, where it's like, hey, if you did well in these 3 tests, like you're probably pretty
nowadays
near the top.
Got to have 2K row because the machines are so important, and that's probably the one that scales the most with the size that ends up helping with the other lifts.
I would put something in there like the standard, maybe even a little bit heavier these days though.
Ooh.
Yeah.
right.
I think that you need to be able to have barbell cycling in there. I think that you need to be able to have fatigue gymnastics, maybe not have it be like the whole separator. The one thing that like you had asked before about over tested in the current sport, I think sometimes gymnastic skills, especially something like handstand pushups or handstand walks, are probably over tested to the point where like you can count on every single competition having a score that's basically dedicated to who's the best on their hands in the field right now.
Yeah.
And I benefited from it from coaching Alexis for so long in terms of like, we could count on that being a
3
good
points
finish.
every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of a sport that's testing fitness, I think it's a skill that's over tested. And so what I'd want to have the gymnastics in whatever that 3 test battery is, to not have it be like the sole determiner, but it has to still be important.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had one. You had
2K
one.
row, the standard. Yeah, well, that
You got to bring it home. What do we got? What's the third one?
I feel like it has to be something that has heavy barbells moved in it, unless you made your standard really heavy.
Yeah. Well, maybe not really heavy.
'Cause
So
you gotta
it was
just be
135,
strong.
95. Maybe we go to like 165, 110 or something.
For people who don't know the standard,
The standard is
30
clean and
jerks, 30 ring muscle ups, 30 snatches.
Yeah.
135.95.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think it would have to be something that has a lot of reps, like maybe something like Murph. So if you'd have a 2K row, which kind of gives you the
7 minute, 6 to 7 minute time.
Yeah. I mean, both of those are kind of the same time frame, but one of them is barbell cycling, and it's either that or some sort of a 1RM test, like the CrossFit Total 2.0 or something. It's like overhead squat, clean, something else, because then you have full strength spectrum, I guess, like aerobic power, and then kind of whatever the stimulus of mixed CrossFit is, pain and skill tolerance.
I'd probably put something in there that had squat endurance, whether it's a barbell or wall balls or something else. I think that squat, like the amount of volume that we do in squatting inside of the sport, is like another score in and of itself.
Kelly, I think, is like 5 rounds of like 400-meter run, 30 wall ball, 30 box jumps or something like that.
27, 24, 21, 18, 15, 12, 9, 6, 3, front squat burpee.
Without the handstand push-ups?
Yeah, no handstand push-ups. Because I just
Yeah,
talked against
you
them.
just said they were
I don't want to be a hypocrite.
Oh my gosh.
I think both of those would end up giving you a pretty similar top 10 to what you have right now. Right now, I think like the top, especially on the dude side, top 10, 11 guys are pretty like established. You'd have those guys would finish in the top 10, 11 for those. But I especially think the wall balls, because that's a height favored element. And as a proxy for another machine test, like something that measures height or size in some capacity, like would probably end up reflecting pretty well. Because I do think that is something like that's something that the Hatfields and Mertens would crush.
Yeah.
And although those guys are like super good, I think part of the reason maybe that they aren't like, it's just tougher for folks in that size element to keep up with people on machines.
How would you respond publicly to the people out there that would say that programming doesn't matter and the best will just be the best?
It's complete idiocy. I think,
There you have it.
yeah. I guess I was gonna say I wouldn't say that publicly, but it's a podcast. Oops, that's probably the most angry I've ever been about something. I don't know. Yeah, it 100% matters. Like the order of tests matters. Everyone's got their own sob story. If you've ever competed, like, oh, I never got to do this event, but I remember in 2021, not the best swimmer, and the 2 years I've done finished top 10 at the games were 2 years they didn't have swimming. I'm not an idiot. Like I'm tracking that probably did help. But in 21, I didn't get to snatch, and that was a time like not everybody was snatching 300 pounds, and I was like a 310 guy then, and so event order matters, and that was something Ben would preach to us about not getting too high or too low because you could have your best event at the first day and think that you're crushing it, and then end up on a bad note, or vice versa. Like it's all subjective, but if there's cuts or if there's space where you don't get to do the events, then the event order does matter. I think.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I think the change that I've noticed when I brought up the eras thing is like the body sizes change, but they don't change because the fitness has changed that much. Kind of like you said, it's more of like, what are we using to measure fitness?
Yeah.
And so if you measure power through a vertical jump, the athletes are going to look different than if you measure power through a max lift. If you measure endurance on a machine, it's going to look different than if you measure endurance through a technical modality like swimming or through one where you have to move your own body weight. So it's completely relative, but that's part of the game is learning to play it within the rules that you're given.
Follow-up question to the idiots. Just kidding. He said idiocy. I just jumped on it. I'm just kidding. No, it's fine. The how many people, and we don't need any names, but in the current era would be near the top regardless of program architecture? Because like I honestly don't think there is, just based on what I've seen over the last 8 years, a style of testing body you could put together to program Tia out of like maybe somebody could beat her or she'd finish second or third.
I know something I said to you guys in the email. I don't know the female side as much as I do the dude side, and it might be different because I also think the body types and maybe some of the biases that the predominant sports that folks use as an introduction to the sport, or like that they do before the sport on the female side, is maybe a little bit different. And it's changed even for the guy side, like from Americans bench press a lot more than other people. And it used to be like the Euros would crush all the cardio events, and there's a lot of biases there. But I was halfway through my counts, and I think like era independent guys who would be, and this is, if you brought any of these folks back to the past, they would destroy everybody just because the sport's advanced in many ways. But I could say probably like five guys.
Five of them
pop off.
Just no matter what. They're
or at least through all the eras so far.
Oh, through all of the eras.
Yeah,
like,
that's what I was thinking.
Oh,
like
5 total, not like 5 in the current one.
I think some of them, I just assume that there used to be stereotypes about certain body types performing a certain type of way, and everybody's gotten better now to where those don't apply. But also I think whenever you're doing these hypotheticals, you also have to apply like, all right, if the old training methodologies existed and maybe these things that used to hold folks in this body type back continue to hold those people back, then that would maybe be more of a limiter than it is now.
I mean, even if, so quarterfinals this year had Heavy Isabel.
There's no quarterfinals this year.
Sorry, online semifinals had.
I didn't even do it.
Yeah. It was the Heavy Isabel. What other heavy tests were in it?
They had there was power clean and jerk.
There was
the burpees.
Yeah, the heavy back squats.
There was the power clean and burpee workout,
which was kind of power
GHD
heavy
and semi-heavy overhead stability workout.
So there's kind of 4 tests that really favored being just strong and really capable at moving weight consistently. If you change the architecture of those tests and 3 of those are like more classic CrossFit, high turnover gymnastics, body weight, all of that stuff, and you have that many people in the field, are there any of the current elite that just don't make it through like used to be? Or you think that most of them are like in that format, there's probably still getting through even if it's just...
Basically just making the tests simpler, lighter.
I was thinking simpler, lighter, and more kind of what they used to be in terms of like the old open would sort to regionals, and there would be some really, really good people that got knocked out, because if there was one strength test and you have 200,000 people in the field and you're weak, you're out. And I think that same type of thing could happen. Is like, all right, well, we see the elites now at the games doing gymnastics, and you're like, oh, I thought they would have got hurt on that. But if the sorting test sorted for all big, powerful people that weren't as good at gymnastics as potentially some of the people that just got knocked out because they couldn't cycle those things heavy, then those placings on the leaderboard look different when you have a field of 40 or 60.
I think that concept kind of, if I go through the eras mode, I feel like that kind of phased out during the professionalization era, because one of the things I think when I wrote you guys is that once that era came, you can no longer have a major hole.
You just got to be good enough.
So all of these guys that are knocking around now and smashing my head in every other weekend, like those guys are good at everything.
Yeah.
To where I don't think it would change the end state. If you had that as the only test and there was no in-person test, then that's a different question.
Yeah.
Because even for the online semis this year, there was I don't think everybody did it. Some of the guys had already qualified and whatever. Like I think that's a different test. So if you had like top 30 just online and you see it with people who crush qualifiers routinely and don't necessarily always have the same performances in person, that's a different question. But the way that it's structured now, I think the best people generally make it through because they're not really bad at anything.
They're just good. All right. You got anything else, man? You got to sign us off now. You're the host.
Good luck.
Thank you guys for helping me learn the best way to shave my head. I think that's really the biggest takeaway I've had while I was here. It's been nice to nerd out a little bit, but being a bald guy is really more important to who I am as a person. So I appreciate your support.
More important to who I am.
3 bald brothers.
Yes, we are.
Welcome
We're
to the
out.
club.